What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 83 of the Noizze Podcast, brought to you by Noizze.co.uk and sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. I am your host / your boy, Chris Pugh, and as ever, I'm joined by my very good friend and Mr. Cynical himself, Samuel Lewis. Mate, how are we?
Not too bad, mate. It's a fine Sunday once again. How are you?
I'm good, man. Half term approaching. Not bad.
2 weeks away, my friend.
2 weeks away. Longest term of the year, do you think?
Yeah, it's the longest term of the year until the next one, and then that takes the championship belt until the one after it.
Brilliant. Very ominous. We are the Noizze Podcast. We are sponsored by Stereo Brain Records, and we come your way every 2 weeks. If you'd like to support the show, the best way you can do that is by subscribing on YouTube or liking / following, depending on where you are listening. We are available, of course, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Basically, wherever you listen to podcasts, me and Sam will be there. On our last show, which we aired last week, we did a little special review of Trivium's new record, In the Court of the Dragon. That is still up. That is doing incredibly well in terms of our viewership. So if you haven't checked that one out, please do. You can follow me and Sam on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. We both run that account. I've just actually put out a little tweet, Sam. I don't know whether you saw it. I was curious on people's opinion on All Hope Is Gone and whether it was a bad record or whether it suffered because the three that came before it was so excellent. I tell you what, dude, we're doing a podcast together. Let me ask you: do you think All Hope Is Gone's a bad album?
I think it's a bad album. I think it's a decent album at times. There are very good songs on it, but you're right, it suffers by comparison. If it was any other metal band that didn't have the three albums that preceded it that Slipknot have produced, then maybe we're having a different kind of conversation.
Would you take it over the Grey Chapter?
Yes.
Would you take it over We Are Not Your Kind?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay,
yeah, I'm of the opinion that Slipknot's best albums go in the order that they were released.
Right. Okay. That's
so my favourite Slipknot album's their debut. My second favourite is Iowa. Third favourite,
Yeah. Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. You think We Are Not Your Kinds? They're not like worst. Makes it sound like you think it's a poor album, but your least favourite of their albums, unless you do think We Are Not Your Kind's a poor album, but I don't believe you said that when we reviewed it.
I don't. I just think they've been on a steady decline, unfortunately. It's a good album.
Yeah.
But I think the first three are on the Mount Rushmore of great 21st century metal albums. And that's just the way that it is, unfortunately.
Ironically, Slipknot are going to come up in the news, Sam, which is part of today's show. Running order for you guys listening, we're going to talk about the news. We've also got album reviews on Waking The Cadaver's Authority Through Intimidation and Cradle Of Filth's Existence Is Futile. No Chris meets or Sam meets this week again. That is because, I'll be honest, I have been incredibly busy, as has Sam, and I haven't really had a chance to fit an interview in. It did for a moment look like I might get something done with Dying Wish. I'm still going to try and pursue that. But yeah, no Chris meets or Sam meets this week. Unfortunately, we're just going to do 2 album reviews, and we are going to talk about the news. Let's start off, Sam, with the news. Let's start off with something incredibly positive. Mark Hoppus, Sam, is in remission. Obviously, that's the greatest news ever. I just wanted to start off on something on a positive note. Have you been following along with his kind of journey through his cancer treatment?
I have, yeah. I've been incredibly impressed, actually. He's maintained his sort of level of positivity and things like that. And he's also somehow managed to attach his notorious sense of humour to the proceedings as well, which I've enjoyed.
His ability to stay positive in such a difficult time for him is truly, truly incredible. And I think if I remember correctly, he put a Twitter post up the day before he went in for the treatment, like, oh, I've found out that if this treatment doesn't work, it's going to be incredibly, incredibly bad news. And just, I was just like waiting on the edge of my seat, like being like, oh God, I can't wait for his next tweet. I'm desperate to see that he's going to be all right. And for him to be so open and be like, hey, by the way, I've just been told if this cancer treatment doesn't work, then I'm running out of options. Must be so, you've got to be incredibly brave to be that comfortable and that open with that. So, of course, what amazing news that Mark Hoppus is in remission. I think the tweet that he actually wrote was, I just saw my own college I'm cancer-free. Thank you, God and universe and friends and family and everyone who sent support and kindness and love. I still have to get scanned every 6 months. and it'll take me until the end of the year to get back to normal. But today is an amazing day, and I feel so blessed. Can I get a W in the chat? Yeah, what a perfect. That's just so Mark Hoppus, isn't it? That the way the sign off for that statement is so Mark Hoppus.
Absolutely, and thoroughly deserved. Cancer is a terrifying, debilitating illness that few ever actually beat, really, and for him to be able to come out of it on the other side is wonderful news. Shout out to oncologists everywhere as well. They do great work. I don't know how they do that job on a daily, emotional and academic toil. Heroes.
Absolutely heroes, man. Stronger people than I could ever be.
You and me both.
Sam, have you seen the pace that Tool are setting this UK tour?
No, I was actually I was tempted to ask if you wanted to go, but I don't think that's really a possibility anymore, is it?
Well, perhaps we would be able to grab a ticket. Did you know that it's seating only?
I didn't. To be fair, your legs would go numb about halfway through the third song, though, wouldn't it? You'd need a seat.
So this, right, I was thinking about this and I thought, right, okay, I do kind of get it because listen, I've never seen Tool live, and when the headline download, I watched Slayer because it was Slayer's final ever show, and obviously I love Slayer. But you said to me, Tool is very much a performance, which makes sense when you listen to the music. So do you think actually it is that it being seated now is actually fitting for what the gig would entail?
Oh, absolutely. It's the metal equivalent of a night at the opera, seeing Tool. Well, you can't stand for 2.5 hours when they're doing the things that they're doing.
Well, they've had to add an extra show at the O2 Arena. Now, I think there is still tickets for Birmingham, Sam, so maybe we can have this conversation privately, but absolutely I would be open to going, because a couple of weeks ago, I was in a bar with my girlfriend and a song came on and two of one of her favourite bands.
The social life of a girlfriend.
Two of one of her favourite bands, and a song came on and she was like kicking off, like buzzing. And I was like, this is sick, to be fair. Who's this? She's like, this is Tool. And it was a song called The Pot. And then on my way home on Sunday, I just kept listening to it because it's like an amazing song. And I think that Tool are a band that I avoid because of what they require from their listeners sometimes, in terms of, like, you know me, dude, you know, I like 4.5 minutes. I like to be attacked in the face, and then I like the next 4.5 minutes.
I'm sick of these conversations where it's like, I've ignored this thing actively for 6 months, but it turns out it's great, like everyone else told me it is. Isn't that funny, Sam? And I'm like, no, it's absolutely the opposite of funny.
1 second. Last night I played Goliath by Architects, and you said, I love when Simon Neil does this. And then I said, dude, why don't you listen to the first few Biffy Clyro albums then? Because that's what he does. He went, no.
Those two events are completely unrelated.
No, he was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not interested. And I was like, what? This is what he does though for the first few Biffy Clyro albums. Amazing.
What are Architects on the first two Biffy Clyro albums?
Yeah, Biffy Clyro featuring Architects for like 24 songs. Yeah, dude, let's go and see Tool. And just again, because you will know more about this than me, the full seating thing works for you.
Yeah, I think so. I also think we need to invite your enraged girlfriend, by the sounds of things.
Well, she's already got tickets for Manchester because they're playing at the Manchester AO Arena, and then 2 days later they're playing at the Birmingham Resorts World Arena. So, dude,
it's hard to throw elbows in seats, to be fair. So I understand
to
that.
be fair, or to throw elbows to Tool. I can't imagine there's going to be a moment where I'd feel the urge to do that. But, dude, let's talk about that after the podcast, man. Let's get those tickets sorted. Cool. Okay, dude, I mentioned as we were just introducing the show a question on Slipknot because I just posted it out on Twitter. But supposedly, Sam, new Slipknot music is coming. I tell you what, Sam, how do you think Corey Taylor has spoken about new Slipknot music? Go on.
Is it the heaviest stuff they've ever written?
Brilliant. So he hasn't said it's the heaviest stuff they've ever written, but he did say, quote, let's bludgeon everybody. Slipknot have been going round doing
worse.
Slipknot have been going round doing this US Knotfest road show, which every day, Sam, when I see the US Not Fest lineup, I'm bothered by the fact that our Not Fest got cancelled because of COVID. Because the lineup that we would have got, I think, would have been life changing for me and you. I think we'd have had the greatest day of our lives.
It was Slipknot and Sleep Token already, wasn't it? When it was early announced, there's a chance, and then I think the American one added Megadeth and Behemoth, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, and
which would have been terrific.
And then I believe on this current road show, they're doing like Code Orange on it as well. And it literally, man, the lineup is wild. I think Code Orange on it anyway. But yeah, I will always be salty about the fact that that and Rage Against the Machine got taken away from us. I'm not sure how I'm ever going to. I don't think I'll ever get over
Rage Against the Machine because they're the sort of band that just might never turn up again.
Yeah,
I'm so angry.
We might never ever see them. Hopefully that's not the case, but we might never see them. That is gonna irk me for the rest of my life if that ends up being the case.
Yeah.
So in terms of the actual news story, Sam, Corey Taylor was on the Eddie Trunk podcast, and he said that basically the band's follow-up to We Are Not Your Kind is, quote, pretty much done, probably about 80% done. We're finishing up some music, and I've got a couple more songs to sing. However, I will say this, don't be surprised if in the next month or so you hear something new. Then he was asked if it was going to be kind of like what they did with All Out Life. If you remember, All Out Life came out. It's not on We Are Not Your Kind. And then 4 or 5 months later, then they released Unsainted, to which Corey Taylor responded, it's more of a let's bludgeon everybody and remind them why we're still Slipknot kind of vibe. This will be the release before we get to the single, a little teaser to give people a taste, kind of like what we did with All Out Life, but in the way that we didn't put out All Out Life on the album, this will actually be on the album. And I'm pretty stoked, man. It's going to remind people why they love Slipknot. He also said it's about 14 songs and it's rad. It's got that same rock and roll spirit, but there's definitely a darker tone to it. I think people are going to really dig it. So he hasn't gone for this is the heaviest thing we've written since Iowa kind of quote, which we tend to hear on every kind of Slipknot PR before an album. But he has gone for the let's bludgeon everybody. Obviously, we're going to be interested, Sam, but you mentioned that Slipknot's career has declined, in your opinion, per album. Are you perhaps approaching a point where if that decline continues for you on whatever album comes next, that you would then feel comfortable with Slipknot's discography ending there?
No, I don't. I'm different for you in that respect. We had this argument before. I don't mind just keep producing stuff. And I can just dip in and out depending on what I want out of the band. That's absolutely fine. I'm happy for Slipknot to stay together and keep producing music because the personalities that they are, that's still a fantastic thing. If Mick Thompson wants to keep writing riffs, let me hear him. I'm just not convinced it's going to be that great. The phrase rock and roll spirit does not fill me with optimism when it's associated with a Slipknot album. Like this is not like Fleetwood Mac. What the fuck is rock and roll spirit mean? But they don't have anything to prove. They don't have anything to prove to anybody. And I think that this album will be pretty good with 2 or 3 very good songs on it, like the last one was. I think it's though we've reached a different stage of Slipknot now, with the absence of Joey as a songwriter and sort of the Paul Gray. The loss of Paul Gray, and the replacement of key members with members that aren't taking as large a role in the writing and producing. I'm concerned that Slipknot moving forward is becoming a very monotonous production where it's just Clown and Corey, and that's restricting the variety of the type of music that they're producing. So I think it'll be very good, but I don't think it'll sound anything other than, sort of Diet Volume 3 stuff, which is what they've been doing for 2 or 3 albums.
Yeah, so I know your stance on should bands just stop making records if it's clear that they're no longer in their creative zest or creative peak kind of thing. But the reason why I've asked you that question, even knowing that, is because if you aren't a massive fan of All Hope Is Gone and you think that's better than The Grey Chapter and We Are Not Your Kind, then for you, what you're saying is there hasn't been a great Slipknot album in 17 years. which
I'm
would
saying that, yeah.
which would then obviously, which is, you know, we're talking nearly 2 decades since Slipknot released a great album, in your opinion, which is what has then led me on to, if it was 17 years since Metallica released a great album, we would, you know, would we be having the question of, okay, like, should we just leave it then? Which, okay, you know, now you'd be happy to carry on. I'm not so sure for me. I mean, I actually really liked We Are Not Your Kind. I wasn't a massive fan of the Grey Chapter, and I think
most Metallica fans think there's been 30 years since the last right Metallica album. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to something else, Sam, that's a little more light-hearted. There has been a website reported that is like a band lyric counter that counts the most popular lyric in a band's discography. I am going to search Metallica now, Sam, and you have to guess what Metallica's most popular lyric is.
When you say popular, you mean like a line that they've used?
Sorry, yeah, the line that a word that they use the most. I've got the bar chart up now in front of me. A word they've used the most out of 184 analysed songs and 40,000 analysed words.
Are we excluding like obvious pronouns like I, me, we, things like that?
Yeah.
That's quite tough.
It is tough, but when I tell you what it is, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course.
I'm going to go with fight.
Not a bad shout. Is fight on this list? Yeah, I can't see it. I am like quickly skipping down now. The actual most popular word, Sam, that they've used the most is yeah. 276 times.
Yeah, actually, like lyrically, yeah.
The word yeah. 276 times.
Fair enough. See, I was trying to avoid. No, not at all. Yeah, I was trying to avoid like words like that because I thought that would be like you know what I mean. I was trying to think of like what actual like, you know, like fight or battle or war. Yeah. I don't know, something, that type of thing. Did I ever tell you that? I'm sure I did. Well, I'm sure I did at some point. The story when Slash walked in on James Hetfield having sex with the groupie.
And he was like, it sounds exactly how you'd expect it to sound.
It sounded exactly like you imagine James Hetfield having sex would sound. And he's like, yeah. Ooh.
Brilliant.
He's like he's a caricature of himself, even in real life. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, that is no surprise whatsoever. I wonder what the most used like non-spoken language type word, you know what I mean? Like, is like their most common normal adjective or phrase or whatever.
Well, just the top 10. So yeah, it's 276. Then you got see, never, now, time, down, more, away, life, and back. That was
okay. So the first 10. Yeah. So the first non like prepositional type word that can you use to join things together is life. That's all right. Fair enough. I can understand that.
Dude, give me a band. I'm going to search and see what or artist and see what their most used lyric is. I like this. We're not going to go too far down this hole. But...
5 Finger Death Punch.
5 Finger Death Punch. Right. Okay. This website, by the way, is called Repeated. That is repeated spelt with REPEETED. Right, let's have a look. 5 Finger Death Punch. I was kind of hoping I never have to type that into my computer ever again, but you know, whatever.
Well, there's some of our favourite lyricists, so I thought, I wonder.
So their most popular lyric is never, which they've used 228 times. Others turn up that is away, down, everything, inside, nothing, hate, yet again, say, and the F word as well. Let's actually search up Slayer. I'm curious what Slayer's most popular lyric is. Something aggressive, I'm certain.
Blood, Satan.
Death. Brilliant. We definitely could have predicted that. Death 230.
Can't argue with that, mate, at all.
Over 137 songs, they've used the word death 230 times. You love to hear it, man. You love to hear it. That is amazing.
Unreal.
Let's move into album reviews, Sam. We are going to start with Waking the Cadaver or Cadaver, Sam. Do you think, are we going to go for Cadaver or Cadaver?
I think it's Cadaver, mate.
We'll go Cadaver. Waking the Cadaver, Authority Through Intimidation, is out on October 22nd via Unique Leader Records. Unique Leader, a label that me and Sam have basically obsessed over in 2021. It's the death metal band's 4th album and the follow-up to 2013's Real Life Death. Sam, as we get into reviewing this album, I have to ask you, where is the humanity on this album?
There is none.
Where is the humanity?
There absolutely is none. This is an album that sounds like what would happen if somebody openly wondered what would the orcs from Lord of the Rings sound like if they made a band.
Yeah. Now, this is it the most extreme thing we've reviewed this year?
Yeah.
I'd say it is.
Yeah, I think so. It's more extreme than the only thing in the wheelhouse was maybe Pupil Slicer.
Yeah.
And that maybe Isaiah record is pretty
Isaiah
heavy.
Or Cognitive.
Yeah, but I think there's a gap between them and this.
Yeah, this is new levels of extremity, I think, for us this year. That doesn't always translate into a good record, though, just because it's incredibly extreme. So, Sam, what are your thoughts?
I think it's incredibly extreme, but I'm not entirely sure it's any good.
Okay, interesting.
So I have to preface this. This isn't for me. So I might be just singing from the wrong hymn sheet here, and there might be an extreme metal audience where this just strikes a chord with. And if that happens, I'm not going to sit here and be like they're wrong. Not at all, because I don't think I'm the audience for this. So I want to do that, but I also want to give it a fair review as well. I think my issue with this is outside of the once you get past the, oh my God, this is so heavy, oh my God, this is so crushing, I do wonder what else is there. And then once that novelty wears off, I do find myself wondering a lot of the times where the actual, engaging element of the song structures are. I find if you take out the pig squeals and you take out the deep guttural growls and just focus on the songs, the riffs, the transitions and things like that, it is fairly repetitive for me. It follows a very similar blueprint. The riffs are almost identical from one song to another. That is not actually helped by the vocals because that sort of pig squealy deep sound is so consistent across the record. It's actually difficult to distinguish from a track to track in terms of standout moments. So in terms of, for me, like I want to talk about some of the positives. I thought the pitch harmonics in the opening track, Civic Assault, is fantastic. And that's the most impressive moment for me, as it immediately sort of envelops you into this type of sound.
Is that the one that I played to you before you left mine on Friday night?
Yeah, the opening track, yeah. And there's a nice change of pace and rotation of tempo, and the riff changes is fine. But even by the end of that track, every transition sounds identical to the previous one. It's just feels like more of a similar style. I thought that when they started to vary away ever so slightly was when it found its groove a little bit. So there's like a metalcore riff in Corpse Decomposition that I quite enjoyed. And in Human Shop, which is the most ridiculous song title I've heard for a long time, there's like a nice slow methodical stomp to it that I actually enjoy from a rhythmic standpoint. And then it goes back into the sort of back to style. Same with Frenzied Vehicular Rampage. There's a riff at the end that reminds me of Billy No Mates by Knock Loose, that discorded sound, and they're rotated between. And then there's an amazing, really, really great breakdown in Arbiter of Punishment. It sludges through the middle, and it's really like powerful and plodding and slow and really, really impressive and groovy. But for me, Chris, that's about it. The rest of it feels too similar to each other. It follows a similar structure. And for me, I'm not into vocals that are that abhorrent and extreme. I actually think by track 3 or 4, the novelty's worn off to the point where it becomes like, okay, is there something else, please? Because not only is the sound identical, it doesn't allow the vocalist to actually have any kind of melodic change. Because even if you did screams and growls, there are different types of pitch and timbre that you can add to different screams and growls to give variety. But that particular type of screaming is literally, it's one note, which means that the entire album sounds like one riff, one note, and it wears off very, very quickly for me. And I couple that with the fact that I'm not really perhaps in the wheelhouse to be listening to that type of music to begin with. So it might hit a chord with a big extreme metal following who won't be looking for this type of brutality and regularity and all that sort of stuff. And if that's the case, power to them. I wish every success. but it didn't do that for me. Where do you sit with it?
I think this is a really fun album to listen to. I think that if sitting with it and picking it apart piece by piece in one sitting does give you that feeling of repetition, because I do feel I am with you in the sense of the pig squeals and the snorts. When you first hear them on Civic Assault, it's like, wow, like that is crazy. That is so obtuse and insane how this is being performed. But by we get to Arbiter of Punishment, which is the longest track on the album. You used to hearing it, and there isn't a great deal of variation, and I feel purposefully so. I think what I would say is that this is unlike any other Unique Leader record we've covered this year. A lot of the Unique Leader albums that we've covered, and I don't think there's been one that we haven't like loved bar this one. They've all had this kind of like apocalyptic sound. This is more raw, low tuned, extreme metal, like beyond death metal. Although I do like actually where throughout the record they break into like fight riffs, like malevolent style fight riffs quite often, and I personally really enjoyed that. And Civic Assault, they give like this final breakdown with like pig squeals in this malevolence fight riff, with it being like blast beat central in the background, and it's like borderline hilarious how heavy it all sounds. And that's where the record is like fun to listen to. I think I could drop back into songs of this album in the future, but I don't think I'd ever listen to the whole record in its entirety ever again. I don't think, like, I travel, or like during my travels to work, I wouldn't listen to this album in its entirety. I might chuck on Threaten Physical Force because it's the most intense, insane 180 seconds of music I've ever heard. I think it's ridiculous. It's just relentless force of anger, blast beats, visceral vocals, fight riffs. You know, where do you even begin? And there's like the real punch power in the vocals at the climax of the songs, where it's insane. So I could chuck on Threaten Physical Force, but I don't think I would ever play this album through its entirety. One thing I would say, Sam, is I think this album is cleverly timed at only 28 minutes. This couldn't have gone 40. If this would have gone 40, I think we would have been struggling.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. But even that is it's a strange compliment to say, isn't it? That one of the positives is that there's not a lot of it.
When you kind of zoom in on what I've just said, that kind of sounds like that's what I'm saying.
Isn't it good that it doesn't last very long, Sam?
That's not necessarily what I meant.
No, I know. But it is good that it doesn't last very long, Chris. You're right. Like for example, like I think there are some moments that are really terrific. I want to talk a little bit about the last couple as well. So Asphyxiating, Ligature, the opening breakdown, that first 40 seconds, really terrific, fantastic. And then it heads back into the process and the blueprint that we've established before. I'm with you. It'd be very difficult to sit through an album of this for the pleasure of it. I think seeing them live would be an interesting venture as well.
Yeah.
Just again, but that's the thing. Is it supposed to just be a spectacle? Do you know what I mean? Like, is this like the death metal equivalent of like the WWE, where you're supposed to just enjoy it from an entertainment standpoint, but not actually take it very seriously, and just enjoy it as it happens? For me, it feels like a sort of metal equivalent to sort of one of those videos that you see of like these incredible performers who play like guitar with their toes, or they can like play drums while doing a handstand or something ridiculous, and it's fantastic to watch for that 2 or 3 minutes. But I'm not buying the EP of the guitar toe man. Like, I'm just not doing it. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like once cool, he plays Beethoven's Fifth with his pinky, marvelous. But then after that, I'd rather hear Beethoven do it, and that's the way that I tend to feel about this type of stuff. Once the novelty wears off, I do find myself thinking, "Where's the song here? Not really. What's going on?" Sort of thing in terms of structure, and they don't help themselves. I know they're not trying to, but they don't help themselves in terms of the songwriting here. In terms of the way that the guitar tone is identical from track to track. There's no variation in some of the tone or really some of the riff changes at all. A lot of the transitions, these down-tuned chordal movements, where there's very little intricacy. And I know that that's designed to be a nice platform for the vocals and for the brutality and that type of stuff. But it does feel like there are 6 to 8 sort of fragments of one idea or just one long thread running through, and that for me is not an effective way to have an album in this style. So I mean, it's short, it's sharp, it's brutal. You'd play it to someone to be like, look how heavy this is, and then it go back on a shelf somewhere, or back in deep in the vestiges of a Spotify playlist that you only play when you're really angry, or you're going to the gym or something. And that's not what appeals to me. I just think it has a certain purpose and has a certain niche audience, and I think it will appeal to that particular audience. But I'm not sure it does much else for me.
You mentioned asphyxiating ligature, and that's got the best moment on the record. There's like a tempo change riff. It kind of reminds me really of Necrophobic by Slayer.
Oh, that's a nice show.
And that's the best moment on the album. That is an asphyxiating ligature. I think is probably the best song. But the vocals that end that song, Don Campen is the name of the vocalist. The vocals that end.
Oh, he's like a real human being, not like something that's created there, like CGI.
Well, I put a tweet out the other day being like, if Tom DeLonge heard this album, he'd be buzzing because he was like, "See, aliens do exist. There's no way Don Campen's a human being. Like,
no, there's no way we share DNA with this person.
Honestly, it's like beguiling some of the vocal sounds, and the most insane it gets is the vocals that end asphyxiating ligature. He sounds like a clicker from The Last of Us. Look, if anyone's ever listened and you've played The Last of Us, unfortunately you haven't because you're a bad person, Sam. But literally, he sounds like a clicker. The noises that he is making, I literally cannot believe. And that's why I said, like, it's a
terrible advert for The Last of Us, by the way, based on why. It sounds horrendous.
This is a fun record to listen to. I enjoyed listening to this. Just the pure insanity of this album is fun to listen to. But you have to go in and listen to it in small pieces, because 28 minutes of this, it does feel like a long 28 minutes. And there are some, though riff structure is repetitive, there are some incredibly hard moments. There's a pinch harmonic into the closing breakdown of corpse decomposition, and it hits like a truck. And then you add in the pig squeals as well. You feel physically attacked. Human Chop Shop has got this opening slow and low riff timing with just inhumane vocal sounds, and then it drops into this kind of really cool, I'll say Malevolence again, that two-step rhythm that Malevolence are basically perfecting in their verse riff writing. There is moments of this album where it does what my favorite thing that death metal does when it meets in the middle with hardcore. That's where I love death metal. And there are moments of this album where that does happen, but over 28 minutes, this is just this fire blast of anger, and the extremity of the vocals does wear off after 3 or 4 songs. It no longer becomes this really cool, shocking thing. It's why, in the case of Slaughter to Prevail, why Alex mixes it up vocally, I believe, because you listen to Demolisher by Slaughter to Prevail, and it is like this really stunning, like, your eyes are in the back of your head, you can't believe what you're hearing. But if there was 12 of them, Sam, you'd just go through and be like, oh, it's another one where Alex does the big horrible Russian growl.
Same with Lorna Shore, mate.
Same with Lorna Shore, yeah.
Phil Ramos made that noise every song, it would lose all impact and meaning.
Yeah, I don't want Will Ramos to ever do that ever again. I want him to have done it into the Hellfire and leave it.
So do Will Ramos' parents, probably.
Yeah, brilliant. I want him to have done it into the Hellfire and never do it again, because in that moment, it sounds insane. It's awesome. And like, it came on in the club we're in last night, and everyone loves hearing it. And it's just really fun, huge moment. I don't want to see it drilled into the ground, but the insanity of Don Campen's vocals here does kind of get drilled into the ground. So I enjoyed this. This is a good record. I would probably happily go back to Waking the Cadaver again. I just wouldn't listen to it in one full sitting.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not for me, and I can't pretend that it is. I think people that are into this type of music will enjoy it for what it is. But I think its purpose is served in short bursts and viewed as almost like a a test case for vocal extremity, but not actually a representation of what a great metal album is for me.
First Unique Leader album this year, Sam, that you've not loved. Speaks to the quality of Unique Leader in 2021.
It really does, but also shout out to Unique Leader for giving bands like Waking the Cadaver a platform to send their music out. I'm glad I got to hear them, and there is an audience for this music.
Let's finish, Sam, on Cradle of Filth's Existence is Futile. It is
a world where Cradle of Filth is the lighter of the two albums we're reviewing today.
Yeah. It's out on October 22nd via Nuclear Blast. It's the band's 13th album and the follow-up to 2017's Cryptoriana. I really should mention here, as we get into this review, that I have very limited knowledge of Cradle of Filth as a band outside of the knowledge that I would, of course, know because I pay attention to the metal sphere as closely as I do. So at some point, I do plan on doing what I did with death metal, where I have this huge deep dive into the black metal genre and I listen to all the classics. So because I did that with death metal, I think like March, and I came across just this like plethora of really awesome death metal bands like Death, Obituary, Carcass. And it was this really cool moment for me where I was discovering all these great new records, all these great bands, Deicide as well, that I'd not heard. I 100% plan on doing that with black metal, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know a great deal about the Cradle of Filth musically. I know them as this band that over 30 years have become a name that is synonymous with extreme metal, and are absolutely one of the bands that have created a platform and have crossed over and transcended metal in terms of recognition. I do feel like they're one of the few bands that I'm confident someone who doesn't listen to metal would at least heard the name Cradle of Filth. Maybe not always for positive reasons. Their controversy surrounding their merch lines, etc., has always kind of, sometimes their merch line, I feel like maybe as being bigger than the band. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Cradle of Filth have become synonymous with extreme metal to a point where they're like Slipknot, that become like a universal name to people that don't follow metal. Also, on a side note, if you're going to spend a month just listening to black metal, you've got to get a puppy or something, man. I can't be having you sitting in the dark when I can run through your house and stuff.
All of a sudden, I've got my hair's grown like all down my back, and I'm wearing white paint on my face.
Can't be doing you just turning to me with gaunt eyes every so often and be like, "Do you ever think that nothing matters, Sam?" And I'm like, "No, Chris, get the fucking bat out your window, like what is going on?" Like, do you know what I mean? You've got to just like, if you've got to do it, you've got to watch like a sitcom at the same time, like just like watch like Friends or something, just every half an hour. Just mix it up, man. I can't be having you look like Noel Fielding in the IT crowd. I can't be doing it.
So with me saying that, Sam, I actually think that ironically, maybe I am the ideal person that could tell a Cradle of Filth fan whether the album's good or not, because I haven't really got anything to compare it to. This is the first time I've ever sat down and listened to a Cradle of Filth album in full. So I'm going to do something now, Sam, that I only do when I'm really confident that me and you are going to have the same opinion. Okay? Dude, How great's this album?
Yeah, it's really good.
This album's really great. Good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good black metal album. It's a really good Cradle of Filth album. And I've listened to a bit more than yourself. I did a bit of a deep dive. So a bit of a deep dive into a couple of albums a few years ago. And they've because they've been so famous, you feel obliged to sort of do that. I actually met the drummer once in like late 2000s. He's terrific. And this is a great album. This is, you know, we need to have a segment for our podcast end of the year. We talk about comebacks of the year, and on that list is going to be At the Gates, Carcass, Cannibal Corpse, and Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
Because what a year it's been for veteran metal bands, Maiden as well, arguably.
Yeah.
What a year it's been for veteran metal bands, proving that they can still hang. Now, this is a terrific black metal album. There's some elements of this that I'm not so keen on. Miss me with spoken word introductions. I'm not into that.
Is that not part of Cradle of Filth's credo, though? I feel that's not.
Yeah, so that's I was about to sort of pacify it with. I understand that that's part of not just them, but black metal in general features that, and you have to kind of accept it, the territory. The whole Mother Nature is brutal thing doesn't work for me, but I understand that it's, you know, part of who they are. So if you're listening to Cradle of Filth, I mean, like no one's listening to Cradle of Filth in the same way they listen to the new like Sam Fender album, where you just like, oh, if worst comes to worst, I can be able to ignore it. That's not how this is going to work. It's not lift music. You're gonna have to sort of handle it here. So for that purpose, if you're a black metal fan, a metal fan in general, or a Cradle of Filth enthusiast, or even a Cradle of Filth sympathizer like myself and you, that we're prepared to like them, we're happy to like them, we're interested in getting into them. This is a really, really good album. This might be one of the guitar performances of the year.
Oh my god, the guitars on this album
as well. Well, some of the musical elements, the guitar work here is just sensational. But I think this is a really, really strong album. I think some of the riffs are really well written. I think some of the songs are beautifully structured. There's a lovely mix of the progressive and the extreme. They do the thing that I really enjoy, that where black metal bands don't just stick to the Dungeons and Dragons-esque style songwriting that they've become known for, and they spread out a little bit. There's elements of thrash here. There's elements of sort of traditional heavy metal here. And there's some really great riffs and some choruses. Danny Filth is in great voice.
Yeah,
he shows his range. His famous screams and high pitched cat calls and all the stuff that he's become renowned for, but also a real ability to write a melody and stuff that it's good and dark lyrically. Like all the lines appear to be taken from a Bram Stoker novel, as you'd expect, and it's the cocktail that Cradle of Filth are capable of producing in the same way that you would expect from, I don't know, if you listen to a Nightwish album or a Dimmu Borgir album, there's certain tropes that you expect, and I think they do all of them, and they do all of them really, really, really well. I think there's a few really good songs on here. My favorite track is Suffer Our Dominion.
I thought Suffer Our Dominion might be yours. Mine actually is How Many Tears to Nurture a Rose, which is the song before Suffer Our Dominion.
Yeah, I some of the guitar work on this is just tremendous. The verse riff of Suffer Our Dominion is fantastic, and the solo at the end is just it's just fantastic. The synth work is terrific.
Can I just say, Sam, just as you mentioned that, I don't think I've ever heard a band use orchestra as well as Cradle of Filth do on this album. Now, that's not me being some kind of expert and have deep knowledge on every band that's ever used orchestra, but I don't think I've ever come across a band that uses orchestration as good as Cradle of Filth on this album. It's brilliant. They don't waste a second.
I agree, but also it's not overpowering.
No.
Like it doesn't feel like bolt on, where it's just there for the sake of it to pacify the ego of a keyboard player. It's not there. It's not there for that at all, and it really does add to the songs and gives it a real pathetic fallacy. Sort of, you know what I mean? Sort of the way that it adds to the music, sets the atmosphere and imagery. I think it's really, really nice. There's some really great songs on here. Black Smoke from the Lips of War is terrific. The riff to open that is fantastic. There's real intensity, where actually I was thinking of At the Gates-esque sort of fast-paced racing hard metalcore was making an appearance. The lead guitar trills at the end was sort of, you know, very classic black metal, almost Judas Priest, which I enjoyed. The opening track is brilliant.
That symphonic sound that bursts out the gates is gorgeous.
Really good. I like transitional interlude tracks as well. I've always been a fan of that, and I think that does a nice job of setting a musical blueprint for what's to come later on. Overall, this is a really impressive album. I mean, what more could you expect from a Cradle of Filth album released near Halloween that also happens to be their 13th album? It couldn't be any more demonically timed, could it really? But it seems to have been written in perfect conjunction with all those tropes. It is it's Cradle of Filth in all its glory, really. What you want out of Cradle of Filth, and what you listen to if you fell in love with Cradle of Filth with Nymphetamine. and all their famous tracks from back in the day, then this is an example of that. I don't think it quite has that transcendent song, perhaps, that they could build another era on necessarily, but this is a very, very good album that will, I think, I know the black metal fan base, it can be notoriously pedantic and picky and hard to please at times. But I really, from the outside looking in, I can't see how you listen to this and you're a Cradle of Filth fan, you walk away without thinking that's really good. I can't wait to see them. It's good to have them back.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for Ed Sheeran to appear on one of these songs.
I was wondering how long it would take for one of us to mention the potential Ed Sheeran collab. It's just the idea of him entering this sphere is just so fascinating. Is he like, imagine like crawling King Chaos? Imagine Ed Sheeran being on that song.
There's what was the song? I forget the name because I didn't mention it in my notes. But there's a song with a female backup vocalist on, isn't there? And they do like a vocal duet type deal near the conclusion of one of the songs on here. And
is it the Dying of the Embers?
It might be the Dying of the Embers. But there is a song. There's a song with a female vocalist, and she sort of joins in at the end. I mean, the boy Sheeran could absolutely do that role if he wanted to. I would love to hear Ed Sheeran sing the sort of lyrics that Danny Phil writes. That would be absolutely incredible. Imagine Ed Sheeran talking about like the ecological foundation slipping into black chaos and all this sort of stuff. I just think it'd be marvelous. But on a side note, that's a bit of a side buffer really for what we're trying to say about this overall album. This is a terrific record. It's a terrific black metal record, and I, like you, only ever occasionally dip my toe into the black metal sphere, and I've felt at times that we've shared this opinion that once this is the best black metal already been written. You know, once we've got past a certain point with a certain collection of bands, what more could be done with this type of music? But Cradle of Filth are showing that there's a freshness and intensity to what they're doing alongside the traditional black metal stuff that I think is really very, very impressive. This is a very good album from a historically great metal band, and it's great to see.
I think, Sam, if this album was 9 songs, I think I'd be thinking, like, should I consider this like top 10 album of the year? I think this album's great, man. I do think it's a bit long for me. 14 songs.
It's a bit much.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether, and 3 of them are like interludes. Ashen Mortality, Here Comes a Candle, and The Fate of the World on Our Shoulders are like interludes into the songs that come after. But even though let's say it's like 11 full songs, so I do feel that this album is a little bit long in the tooth for me. But what is here, man, this album's great. Like, Cradle of Filth are quite clear, like a great band. I've never really listened to them before. Even if we go with like Existential Terror, which is the second song on the album, or theoretically the first after The Fate of the World on Our Shoulders, because that's like an interlude. Yeah. You mentioned it. That symphonic sound that bursts out the gates, kind of classic black metal. Then it's got this amazing punching lead riff, and that middle section that turns into this kind of more poised, slow build. The drummer, mate, Martin Skarupa, I think his name is. Oh my God, the drummer is incredible.
Yeah.
There's kind of, and I'm not sure which of the 2 guitarists is the lead guitarist, either Richard Shaw or Marek Schmurda. The guitar on this album is stunning.
They both do a terrific job, even because there's harmonized elements as well, and there's terrific rhythm riffs going underneath, and there's some real complexity and progression. It was very impressive.
Black Smoke Curling from the Lips of War. The opening to that song could have fit on In the Court of the Dragon by Trivium. This kind of furious, technical, soaring opening. And then you've got that orchestral melody behind it as well. And Danny Filth, his vocal range is superb. He's got this real like classic rasp to his vocals that I've never really properly listened to Cradle of Filth, but like I know their main back like headline tracks. And he's so recognisable, and he's got this really like unique rasp to his voice. Yeah. But also, he's brilliant doing these burning low notes. And there is a song on this album that he actually does a small moment of melody, And I cannot remember the name of it. I'm trying to like quickly like scan through it now and see if I can remember it. It might actually be The Dying of the Embers, actually the one that you were talking about. But there's a song on this record, mate, called Discourse Between a Man and His Soul. And I guess that's the song that you would call like the melodic effort on the album.
Yeah.
But it's actually like really quite beautiful in places.
Yeah, the chorus is really nice. It's really quite impressive.
And the keyboards are stunning. Some really great serene guitar work from Richard Shaw and Marek, and from Richard Shaw again, and Marek Schmurda. Whoever is the lead guitarist out of those two, not to discredit the other, but whichever one is lead is an absolute barnstormer. And when I was talking about how many tears to nurture a rose, the opening of that track kind of gave me like Gojira vibes. And then you get this kind of like scarring, snappy vocal line from Danny. There's like a mid-tempo instrumental in the middle eight. It's just wonderful. There's a technical riff that runs underneath Danny's vocals when he does come back in. I think there's this moment where there's like this real incredible galloping riff. It's really Iron Maiden-esque. It's in like the middle eight. This galloping riff comes running through the mix, and it's really brilliant. I am so like blown away listening to this album by how much I actually enjoyed it, because when you're going into a band's 13th album and you've never listened to them before properly, you're automatically assuming that you're not going to be hearing them at the peak of their powers, because 13 albums, 30 years, you would just assume you're going to be catching them towards the end. So I'll be honest, Sam, I went into this album expecting mediocrity and then expecting you to tell me, okay, yeah, this is a 5 out of 10, but go back and listen to this album because this was them at their absolute peak and it's amazing. But dude, God, I mean, if they've wrote a better album than this, then I need to know about it. Like, Cradle of Filth fans listening to this, tell me in the comments, like, their absolute peak performance albums, because at 13 albums, I'm not listening to 13 albums hoping that I'll come across the best one. I need to hear Cradle of Filth at their best, because if this isn't them at their best must be an absolute like stunning piece of art, because this album is orchestrally the most intelligent I've ever heard music put together. They do not waste a second of the symphony, and the orchestra on this record is brilliant. It is harsh, technical, punching. I don't think there's a single breakdown on the album, but it's metal and angry and violent to its core. The artwork is absolutely hilariously brutal and incredible. I've seen Cradle of Filth artwork over the years, so I was expecting good work, and the artwork for this album is brilliant. Mate, I am all in for this album. I think this album's great, man. I really, really love this.
Yeah, it's really good. It is really, really good, and it's a reaffirmation. Like, I wish Corey Taylor would do promos for Cradle of Filth, because this is actually an album that reminds you why people should love Cradle of Filth, isn't it? Yeah. That's what that actually sounds like. So shout to Danny Filth, shout to Black Metal. It's terrific. It really is very, very impressive. There's a maturity as well. I think there's an element of modernity to it as well. It's fresh. It sounds intense. It sounds upbeat. It doesn't sound aged. They don't sound old. They sound in great form. It's really very impressive. It's beautifully mixed all across the board. This is a really, really good album.
That, Sam, is where we are going to leave off episode 83 of the Noizze Podcast. Bit of a shorter one this time around, because there's no Chris Meets to come. We do apologise for that. I'm going to try and get an interview sorted for our next episode. I'm going to look at the release schedule, Sam, and I'm going to see what we are going to review on the next episode. We're definitely going to be reviewing one album which we received in our inbox a few days ago, but not supposed to reveal what that was at this point. But very exciting, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, indeed, we are excited about that one. It's a good one coming up.
Yeah, I'm going to try and remain tight-lipped and not say anything. So we are going back in 2 weeks' time. Release schedule is going to be checked by me. We are definitely going to be reviewing one of the big bands coming out at the end of this month. We're hoping as well that we get Every Time I Die in on the schedule as well. Thank you so much for listening as usual. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow or like, depending on whichever service you are using, if it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Follow us on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. Both me and Sam run that account. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. It's amazing. Me and Sam are having this is the most successful year we've done this podcast. Things are really moving forward. Our Trivium review has done great numbers for us. And me and Sam don't really focus about the numbers, really, do we, Sam? We do this because we enjoy doing it. But just seeing the engagement with the Trivium review and seeing how much people are loving the album has been really fun for us. This has been a great year for the podcast. So if you're here and you're listening, it means the world to me and Sam. Thank you so much. We are going to be back in 2 weeks' time. We will see you then. We love you. Bye.